Alright man, we're pulling. Get ready.
I'm a cataclysm. Gonna be good.
Wait for aggro, right?
I'm gonna put havoc up.
You are waiting for aggro, right?
Chaos Bolt! Destruction!
Fuck this. You tank him then. Oh, they're all dead. Fuck do I even bother? Listen, make sure you also get the talents, gear, rotation, covenant, soulbinds, legendaries, and more. And don't become a DPS maniac like Flame there.
Hey man, but they should click the subscribe and bell thingy, right?
Yeah, you tell them.
Right. Yeah, so click? Actually, it means a lot to us if you do. Just 2 clicks. Not that much effort if you like our content. And hey, you get to have our tier lists, podcasts, other goodies in your inbox ASAP. You might be pleased you did this. On the first row, go with Flash Over. The extra conflag damage will work wonders for your single target performance, while the extra charge of Backdraft will also translate into AoE damage in dungeons. Flashover will end up being the better option with offering the extra flexibility of another conflict, which works great with another talent down the road, and a specific legendary. Alternatively, you can opt for eradication in single target specific situations as well, especially if you don't play the aforementioned setup. They seem pretty close to each other, all things considered, so go with your choice, but we recommend Flashover for our build. Further down the list, Reverse Entropy is your go-to for the second talent row. Similar to the first row, both these and Internal Combustion seem very closely to each other. Reverse Entropy pulls a bit ahead, on top of it making it the rotation smoother with the added haste buff. Internal Combustion also is a bit harder to play properly, with immolate times being skewed since Chaos Bolt will eat its duration. Bonus haste with the passive proc is easy to not fuck up and really not worth swapping to Internal Combustion at all. Our opinion. Further down, you have the survivability row with the only mobility option in Burning Rush. This has been the staple for Warlock for a good few years in pretty much all content. Now with Demonic Circle being baseline and Night Fae one of the best covenants, mobility issues are less of a concern and opens up the row for other options to see more play. Burning Rush is still very helpful, on demand, with no cooldown. It only costs trickles of HP to maintain, so it's more reliable. However, if mobility is not an issue for you, Demon Skin is a solid alternative for making you passively way more tanky. There are a lot of mechanics that deal mandatory group damage in Nathria, and especially with the prideful affix in dungeons. Dark Pact can be strong, but the usefulness of it is very situational and costs a global for what Demon Skin does passively. We recommend you choose Burning Rush for mobility or Demon Skin for the tankiness, but it has to come down to you, because if you don't use or make use of either one, then it's a waste, whichever one you end up picking. After the multiple nerfs to Inferno over the course of beta and now the release, Cataclysm still remains the best option on the row. Similar to last patch and the one before that, and the one before that. Cataclysm is nice and does really well in AoE, it's a good talent, but after so many years, seeing the devs give up on making this row competitive, it became a bit stale. Cataclysm at the very least works with one of the last row talents, which we will cover in a bit. Other than that, it has tremendous AoE DPS potential and performance, and being able to spread immolate like that is a mechanic too good to sacrifice for anything other than a superior option, cause Soul Shard generation. Granted, the 5th row has seen the addition of Howl of Terror, Mortal Coil still has the most overall uses. It's an unbreakable single target fear, which by itself should suggest you have to be careful how you use it to not make your target run around, supposedly in dungeons, and pull extra friends to join for the party. Another really important component is the heal, which acts as a healing potion for 20% of your HP. Like I said, there are a lot of mechanics that deal so much random damage that having a very short cooldown heal makes you likely to survive a lot more than without it. Still, Howl of Terror is an AoE distract, which can help stopping casts and mobs in their track, provided you are in melee range or close enough so enemies can be affected, since the range of it is fairly small. On the level 45 row, finally, after years, some changes. Roaring Blaze is your go-to for single target priority damage. This is the talent I mentioned earlier, goes with flashover to make for an easier uptime on the damage buff for as long as possible, also better single target. It's nothing particularly groundbreaking. Conflagrate will increase the damage your target takes from Channel Demon Fire, Immolate, Incinerate, and Conflagrate by 25% for 8 seconds. Depending on your haste levels, it's unlikely that your Conflagrate will have a cooldown shorter than 8 seconds, so 100% uptime is not really achievable yet. However, the uptime you can achieve, especially with the Conflagrate legendary, also mentioned earlier, can go well over 80% so long as you are spacing your Conflagrates as much as possible. Although the talent increases priority damage and is your default for raids, it has a lot of potential in mythic dungeons where tyrannical bosses and prideful or mob lieutenants make single target output still desirable. This adds a slight change to your rotation priority, but nothing major to impact you. As opposed to Reign of Chaos, baby, let's go! Every soul shard that you spend during your main Infernal's uptime will give you a 15% chance to spawn another Infernal for 8 seconds. This makes your Summon Infernal cooldown incredibly strong. This works better with another legendary that will reduce its cooldown, since really, Reign of Chaos will be mostly taken in dungeons, and a 3-minute cooldown in dungeons is less than ideal. Reducing that to potentially 2 minutes or less will change your damage profile, so you can have your Infernal for every other big moment, a large pack, a boss, a pride, and so on. It depends on how your tank pulls, so yeah, tanks, if you are watching this, Reign of Fire is lit. Pull as big as you can. And lastly, there are 2 main talents you can use on the last row. Dark Soul Instability is still reliable, still good in all scenarios, especially raids. It offers the option for a 2-minute cooldown, which aligns a bit better with boss mechanics. It's still a pain to maximize its value, since you ideally want to pair this up with your Infernal, and unless you are running the Wilfred legendary, you will have a hard time deciding if you should use it on cooldown or save it. The general rule is that you ideally want to save it for Infernal if, by doing so, you do not lose a potential cast later on. If you cannot bother with that, simply use it on cooldown. Or go with Channel Demon Fire. It's back as well! Haven't seen this viable since Legion, I think. Channel Demon Fire synergizes really well with Cataclysm. Its cooldown being reduced by haste is a bit weird and almost irrelevant in AoE. In single target, you will end up using this on cooldown, since your target will have or should have Immolate on them at all times, while in AoE, the Cataclysm into Channel Demon Fire combo is well known and actually something satisfying to do on an otherwise fairly simple and straightforward spec. Roaring Blaze is probably the main reason why this is really good in single target as well. You want Channel Demon Fire in almost all dungeon situations, although it can work on AoE heavy raid fights like Sun King and single target with the build that we mentioned earlier in the video. The taking point here is that Dark Soul is good in raids for that extra DPS cooldown burst, and can work with the Wilfred legendaries, where you can pair Dark Soul and Infernal more reliably, and Channel Demon Fire in dungeons for that AoE performance. You can always swap them around, but be aware of what that trade-off is. As with everything in modern WoW, no matter how much you want to dress up, you gotta sim. Yeah, I know, what are you gonna do? Ian is trying so hard to make us not feel like we have to sim by making the stat interactions needlessly complicated, but it isn't working. Yay, sarcasm. Truth of the matter, stats are fairly balanced when we are talking equal eye level items. Because intellect is by far the best stat you have, you will end up choosing the higher eye level piece at all times. That makes part of gearing a bit better and simpler, although the stats will differ based on content. When fighting a max of 2 targets, think most raid fights, especially how Master Altimore, haste and crit will be next in line as far as priority goes, with mastery and verse at the bottom. All stats have their value in the end, so keep that in mind. When you start to add a 3rd target in the mix, and obviously even more after that, bosses like Sun King and pretty much all Mythic Plus dungeons, haste is still on top, with mastery very slowly behind. Crit and verse are sitting at the bottom. It falls down to what content you will be focusing on and your versatility when it comes to gear, since we have less gear now than in BFA. As far as critical strike is concerned, it's still a good stat. It has some interesting synergies with the spec, it passively increases Chaos Ball damage and also makes it so your generator spells, if they crit, you will get double the Soul Shard generation. Versatility is self-explanatory: flat damage increase, flat damage reduction, flat HPS increase, etc, etc. You can follow this stat priority as a general rule, but keep in mind the more gear you get, the more the strength of each stat will change when compared with the rest. There are also diminishing returns on stats, which hit at around 30 to 35%, but that's a bit unlikely to be an issue in this patch. Either way, for stats and every other consumable here, the only correct answer is to sim. But we will go ahead and use haste as the one we will be recommending. As for your enchants, Celestial Guidance is the overall winner in both raids and dungeons for your weapon. Sinful Revelation might be a tad better on one target, but unless you want to swap enchants for each boss, Celestial Guidance is not going to make you lose out on any 2 or more target fights. Get Eternal Stats for your chest with a complimentary Heavy Desolate Armor Kit on the house. And by on the house, I mean your pockets, cause this ain't no charity show. Eternal Intellect on your bracers and finish it up with Fortified Avoidance on your cloak for all those times when AoE damage was a bitch, even though you knew you were right, end up sleeping on the couch. In keeping with our stat priority recommendation, socket your gear with Quick Jewel clusters and enchant your rings with Tenet of Haste for that haste buffs. These are easily replaceable, by the way. Going into alchemy, cause it's part of your lessons to becoming a real wizard. Use the Spectral Potion of Intellect for your DPS needs. Works in both single target and AoE. Always flask with a Spectral Flask of Power, cause you know, is the only one, and if you must, you can oil your weapon with Shadow Core oil. That sounded a little bit weird. Nah, it's probably just me. And of course, you will want a feast every chance you get for that sweet, sweet intellect, but can always replace it with a haste food, much cheaper and accessible, the Tenebrous Crone Roast Aspic, or how we call it here in Revamania, Răcitură. Hey, my culture matters. Depending on your gear and legendaries, all covenants are fairly close to each other in damage output, on paper. Of course, some abilities play differently than others, and the utility of some are better than others, and we're also talking about different damage profiles here. With that being said, you should play the one you like the most, but we will recommend Night Fae. Although Destro sims really well across the board, and for me, Kyrian is the best in single target, Night Fae is currently BIS for Affliction and Demo, and for Destro is the most used Covenant. It could be because a lot of top Warlocks also play Affliction on the side, but either way, the damage from Night Fae is the best, if not very close to the top. Soul Rod is not an amazing ability, and most of the time its purpose is to trigger your soulbinds buff, which we will mention in a second. The other effect of buffing Drain Life is only worth mentioning if you need the sustain from Drain Life. Otherwise, damage-wise, nope. For raiding, you want to go with Nia and choose the route that takes you to Nia's tools, Burst. In terms of single target damage, this will be your best bet at getting the most out of your soulbind. Grove Invigoration is her first trait though, and arguably the strongest since it procs when you use Soul Rot and buffs you with a shit ton of mastery. In dungeons you have two choices. Dreamweaver seems to be a popular choice among the top distros, probably because of Field of Blossoms that functions similarly to Nia's Grove Invigoration but gives you haste instead. Dreamweaver is also a bit simpler to use in that it does not have specific restrictions to its output, but you can definitely go for more. The arguably better one, though, is definitely Korain. He comes with Wild Hunt Tactics, giving you 10% extra damage on high HP and execute phase targets. Couple that with First Strike, and you can have a passive amount of burst going into a pack which plays nicely with a Cataclysm and Channel Demon Fire combo. Adding a 10% extra damage and 25% crit chance to that combo will make it incredibly strong. Not to mention, in higher keys, the packs might survive long enough for you to do the combo again, likely within the execute phase. Although you might not get the 25% crit chance, you still have the 10% damage on it. Same with bosses. Whichever you pick, the best routes are usually the ones with one potency slot available. But in case you are a Maverick, the two best potency conduits in order are Ashen Remains and Infernal Brand. For endurance, Diabolical Bloodstone and Resolute Barrier will be your top choices, while for the finesse slots you can go with Fell Celerity and Demonic Momentum. It's up to you which one you choose, so long as Ashen Remains is in one of those slots. Trinkets are a hit and miss, as in you can farm 20 bosses or dungeons and not get the one you want, or accidentally get it on your first try. Ideally, we're the ones that give you intellect and haste or any stats in massive amounts. But if you want to aim for the best of the best, Kabbalist Hymnal is way up there with Inscrutable Quantum Device, the infamous trinket that can heal your tank or give mana to your healer instead of buffing you with stats. But hey, when it does, you will feel it. Soul-letting Ruby is also a good option, maybe a bit easier to get, maybe, or you can opt for the PvP route if that's your jam and get the Sinful's Gladiator's Insignia of Alacrity. But then again, you may not want to get either, so you can always hop on bloodmallet.com or herodamage.com and check the rankings of the trinkets there and see where yours classify. And now we are getting into the good stuff. Cinders of Azakir is maybe the best raid legendary as of this research. It's the one I mentioned works with the Conflagrate build and promotes heavy single target or priority damage. Alternatively, Relic of Demonic Synergy sims really well in overall content. For me, it sims better in single target than Cinders, and it's coincidentally the best legendary for Affliction as well. Or if you want to have fun and blast in mythic dungeons, go with Wilfrid's Sigil of Superior Summoning to reduce your Infernal's cooldown and play the Reign of Chaos talent, which, let me tell you, is fun as fucking shit. It will at least make your Infernal more often cast, and this is a big plus in dungeons where shorter cooldowns tend to perform better even if less powerful overall. When you open on a boss, you start with a precast Incinerate and a precast Cataclysm before the pull. Cast Soul Rot and then Infernal. Use your trinkets and racials if you have them. Pop a Conflagrate, then Chaos Bolt, then Conflagrate again, then Chaos Bolt again, and if you have it talented, channel Demon Fire. After this, you continue to generate shards without capping them or capping Conflagrate charges and spend them on Chaos Bolts. Outside your cooldowns, the single target priority sees Immolate up on your target at all times. Cast Chaos Bolt to prevent capping soul shards. Use Cataclysm on cooldown. Conflagrate when you are at 2 charges. Lower down the list, you Conflagrate for shards and Incinerate for shards. One thing to keep in mind is that if you are playing Roaring Blaze, you want to spread out the Conflagrate charges so you can maximize the uptime on your debuff on the target. When you open up on a dungeon pack, start with Soul Rot or whatever Covenant ability you have. Use a Conflagrate charge, cast Rain of Fire if more than 5 targets are going to be hit, otherwise move straight to Cataclysm and channel Demon Fire. Then use Havoc and move to the priority rotation for AoE. You want to always have Immolate on your main target. Keep Cataclysm on cooldown, Rain of Fire on 3+ targets by default, or cast it on 5 or more targets if Havoc is also available. Cast Chaos Bolt to prevent capping soul shards. Use Havoc if 2+ targets are present for Chaos Bolt cleave, or use it for shard generation if 5+ targets are in the fight, so you can spend the shards on Rain of Fire. Next is channel Demon Fire on the priority list. Further down, you cast Chaos Bolt to spend shards and Conflagrate and Incinerate to generate shards. When using Havoc, ideally you want to pool shards and cast Havoc as soon as it's available, or when a second target enters combat, making Havoc your #1 priority there. Havoc damage is a staple of the spec, and with the buffs to its uptime, it can make or break your performance. The order of these abilities is the order of their importance, not the order in which you cast them. Regardless if you see me capping resources or not, these sections are supposed to give you a graphic representation of how you want to think of your rotation in terms of what to press at which point during the encounter. We want to give a special shout out to the Council of the Black Harvest Discord community that houses a lot of online resources, guides that go a lot deeper into the DESTRO Warlock spec, guides like Motoko's Icy Veins guide and Lucy's Wowhead guide, which these two people are amazing. They also helped us with the feedback for our guide, and we like to give a special shout out to them as well. If you have any questions and if you want to learn more about this show that we cannot show in one video, you can go chat with them on the Discord. Thank you to the patrons for supporting our channel as well. and for always being a part of our community. We love you guys and appreciate all the support that we're getting. If you, dear viewer, also want to support us a little bit more, maybe because you like our content, maybe you like what you do, what we do, you can check the link down below. Thank you for watching the video. See you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.